Black. Come on, Davey. Never easy.
Let's go, King 10.
Welcome, guys. We are back for another episode of The Lock-In. I'm David Docherty. I am joined by my fellow Unibet ambassador and man who, like me, did not win the Irish Open, Dara O'Kearney. Dara, welcome.
Thank you, David. Thanks for reminding me that I didn't win the Irish Open again this year, or even cash it, in fact, which you did. Well done, David.
Yeah, a triumphant min cash plus a ladder. Joining us this week is Scottish poker player and man that, unlike us, did win the Irish Open last week, David Docherty. David, welcome.
Thank you for having me, guys. Thank you for reminding me that I won the Irish Open and that I cashed it, unlike Dara.
In all seriousness, Davey, huge congrats on the result. You took home 365k, a career best payday, I know. We were fortunate enough to be on the rail for the heads up. And although you were very composed, it must be said, it was also very clear, particularly with that sort of triumphant fist bump at the end, that it did mean a great deal to you.
Yeah, of course. I mean, like, it's sort of the thing where you don't give anything away in the game, but I'm like, you know, I'm still feeling nerves. I'm still feeling, you know, the enormity of the situation. Looking around me, I've got all my friends in the rail, got all my family watching at home. It's going to be my biggest score. It's one of the most prestigious titles you can possibly win as a poker player. So, you know, I've got all that going on. And yeah, the fist bump at the end was just relief that I didn't have to keep playing heads up because I was exhausted at that point.
Well, speaking of the heads up there, Dara, David defeated Declan Rice in what was a compelling enough heads up, and it could have gone either way at one point. Decky played terrifically well, as did the other final tableist from Ireland, Andy Black. Can you talk about both of their performances?
Yeah, Decky's an interesting one because he's actually more of a cash game player than tournament player this year. We used to run into him quite a lot at the old MPN stops. He used to pretty much go to all of those, and he used to also play on the micro gaming network. I used to play against him most nights, so you know he has been around for a good while. A lot of people, maybe it was their first time ever seeing him, and they thought he was just some random farmer who had driven up to play the Irish Open, but that wasn't the case. He's actually playing for quite a while, has results going back for quite a while, and has put a bit of work into his game. So it was great to see him get result, and I believe he just got in at the last minute as well, and in the last satellite, and he bagged up less than starting stack on day one. So it just shows you, like, all this talk about, oh, you have to get a stack on day one, although I am mindful of the irony that David was day one chip leader. It doesn't actually mean that you need a huge stack to go deep in the tournament. You know, Declan went all the way to heads up and could have actually won it. I think he was ahead for a while, heads up. So yeah, great performance for him. Andy kind of really just rolled back the years. He was on my very first table, and he actually knocked me out on my first bullet set over set. And he just kind of powered on from there. He was pretty short most of the way through the tournament until a very big pot against Ankit, where he had where he had jacks against Queen 10 on a Queen 10-8 board and hit a straight. And that kind of gave him the chips that propelled him to the final table. It was clear it meant a lot to Andy. You know, Andy, for all of his achievements, has never won the Irish Open. He's had plenty of deep runs. But this was his first deep one in a while, and you know, it's a bit like when some great snooker player like Jimmy White is coming towards the end of their career and they turn up at the Crucible every year, and you know, if or Steve Davis, actually. I remember Steve Davis going late one year. There's always that sort of thought in your mind as an older player, maybe this is my last chance, my last meaningful chance. So I think it meant a lot to Andy, and that came across as well.
I don't know. I think it was just chip race run good, just good old fashioned chip race run good.
Well, speaking of chip race run good, I mean, I gave Kevin O'Donnell, our good friend, a chip race patch, which he graciously agreed to wear, and he lasted about 6 hands. So he's convinced now that the patch is utterly boxed. Which, if you look at my recent live record, there is some evidence for that. So yeah, I'm not sure about chip race run good at all.
No way. So we're even claiming Dave's chip race run good, or at least I am. David, you were kind enough to do a Q&A with me earlier this week, something you also did after your GUK PT Luton win. The theme of the Luton piece was how due, or maybe even overdue, you were. However, in this article, the theme was how you've now switched over fully to becoming a sun runner. Can you talk a bit about the last few years, culminating in, of course, this big result?
Yeah, no worries. I think I was speaking earlier, actually, because I'm like a celebrity now. I had another podcast before this as well.
No, who was
it? Who was it, did you say?
Yeah.
It was Poker and Ears.
Oh, fair enough.
So the lads who,
have you heard of them, David? I'm not sure.
I don't know. I'm trying to think. Do we know them? I don't know. I don't know. They may have won an award after we won it. Maybe.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Anyway, like the same sort of topic came up with them, and I was saying that the pandemic like almost saved my poker career in a way, because I was very much gravitating away from it. I'd sort of been at my wit's end. The bankroll was running low. I didn't have any significant scores in a number of years at that point, and I was playing like a substantially lower ABI than I thought I should be playing. And, you know, just a lot of things like that were culminating in me sort of making the decision to maybe step away. And then the pandemic hit, and I got locked in my house for a year, and the games get really soft online again. And I had basically no option but to just sit in and grind online and, you know, study as much as I could. And then Jack Hardcastle also had a huge amount of success in that time, both online and in the live environment. And us being good friends going back a number of years at that point, he decided that he wanted to stake me. And it was basically from that point onwards where I finally had the opportunity to, you know, just fire all the bullets and everything that I thought I should be playing in. But also had that really long period of time where I could get a lot of study in and get really good at things that I was maybe not so good at. You know, that all just sort of knitted together quite well. And yeah, when I broke through in Luton, it's a huge result, obviously, for me. Like beating Dom heads up was really cool to get over the line. But yeah, I've just pushed on from there. I've really felt a big confidence boost from that, and I've had another couple of wins even besides the Irish Open, the EPT final table, obviously, and I just feel like they are coming like one after another at the moment. Obviously thrilled to win the Irish Open last week, but I don't really feel that that's going to be the pinnacle in the coming years. So I think I still have like other big things to come.
Great stuff. Well, Dara, I think we both agree that David was always one of those guys who ran under EV, probably expressed in a lot of run bad in the end game. There are obviously loads of different ways to run bad and be unlucky in poker. Can you talk maybe a bit about the different ways that variance can manifest?
Yeah, I was talking to somebody about this yesterday. I can't remember who it was, and actually it was Connor B. Yeah, and we were saying that, you know, the problem with live is just the sample size is always so small. Even if you grind quite a lot live, a year is still basically a Sunday online, and we all know how bad a Sunday online can go. And you know, even a series of Sundays, the variance really does come down to sort of the end game. It's when you get into that position and whether or not you win the flip or you're on the right side of the cooler. That kind of determines how your overall results are going to go, because, you know, if the best series of results you have in a fairly large live sample is, you know, 12th to 15th, you're not going to be a winning live player. That's just the reality. You're going to have to need some big scores in there. I was interested to hear David say how the pandemic saved him. Like, I did write at the very end of the pandemic that I felt there was going to be a shaking up in the order, because I was aware of some players who had worked very hard like David during the pandemic, and they were going to come out all guns blazing, but there were other guys who had literally sat on the couch feeling sorry for themselves or enjoying downtime for 18 months, and they were going to find that suddenly they were facing not just rejuvenated players like David, but a whole generation of new players who were completely unknown before the pandemic. Guys like Elliot Houdon, who came straight out and won the big one in the win. And I think we're seeing that that's going to continue to be a feature. Speaking of Jack Hardcastle, I have to share this. Just after David won, I sent him a message saying your boy did good, and his response was very Jack-like. About fucking time, eh?
We talk about chip race run good. Fucking Jack Hardcastle run good. That boy's money runs very, very well.
Yeah, I'm going to hang on to as much of it as I can, I think. I'll just send him my portion of the money.
Send it to him in bags of change.
Yeah, that's quite a good idea, actually. Or maybe like multiple currencies, just so that he has to sort it all out.
On the subject, actually, one thing a few people asked me to ask about was they were surprised that there was no deal done, and apparently it came across on the live stream that David was the one who didn't want to deal. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, David?
I can do, yeah. So basically, as soon as Tom Waters busted in fourth, I think Panos, the Greek guy, had said something about it would have been fair if it was a chop. And he was talking about the fact that the two hands four-handed were very strong. So it was a cooler. And he was like, well, it would have been fair if they chopped it up because, it's sort of unlucky that someone busted in that instance. And I think Declan misinterpreted what he was saying as him asking for a chop. And so therefore, Declan started asking if we wanted to talk numbers, and I just said I'm happy to just keep playing on in a moment. It then came up again when we got heads up, but I had I had a 3-1 chip lead, and when it came to heads up, and I said I'm still quite happy to play. And then when he doubled through me with the A7 be the deuces, we were dead even in chips, and he asked me once more. And, I just said again, I'm quite happy to play on. It's something, I would say it's slightly philosophical in that I'm a bit of a traditionalist where, I recognize that I'm playing a gambling game for a living, and I don't really mind playing it out heads up. I know it's very high stakes, but if it comes to it, I don't really mind playing it out. I also think there's something to be said for regs not realizing their edges, and you're talking about how high variance live tournaments can be. Now, obviously playing 100k heads up match 30 bigs effective is very fucking high variance, but by the same token, I've seen when I've been doing GU KPT commentary or just watching the final tables or whatever over the last few years, I've seen so many instances of regs who I think have a significant edge heads up, three-handed, four-handed, and they're dealing with amateur players. I can't remember which tournament it was, but it was a tournament recently in the last 6 months or something where this young kid had been playing his first ever live tournament, and he was chip leader with 3 or 4 left, and they chopped up the prize pool, and I was like, man, this kid's going to fall to pieces heads up three-handed. You just got such a huge edge on him. Why would you ever deal there? And I understand that people, the money is important for people. It's very high variance, as I say. It could be important in their life. They might need it a bit more in certain points than others. But yeah, for me, I just think there's an edge to be had in those situations. I think heads up edges in live tournaments are sometimes bigger than people think they are, where there's a lot of people who have never played heads up or very rarely played heads up, and you see blunders all the time if you're familiar with heads up poker at all. And if I had played and I'd lost heads up to Declan, I would have been totally fine with that. I think that's a big part of it as well. I don't mind if I do that and I finish second. A lot of people would be annoyed at themselves or second guess whether they should deal. I can accept the results at the end of the day. And yeah, I just felt like I had a pretty significant edge three-handed, and I just didn't want to deal.
Yeah, I appreciate where you're coming from there. I think it's, like you said, a philosophical decision. Obviously, you don't get too many opportunities to get heads up for that kind of amount of money, and the variance is high. But on the flip side, maybe, as you say, if you're willing to just embrace it and sort of let the cards fall where they may long term, or if run over lots of universes, I guess you would have an edge? The subjective value of the money maybe less important these days as well, with you doing so well? I don't know, maybe that's a bit of a two. When we chatted midweek, Dave, you also said something that I think the Irish poker community would actually really appreciate. You said, I had a discussion with Owen Robinson many years ago about whether winning an EPT or the Irish Open would be more prestigious. I'd like to take this opportunity to state I've changed my mind in recent days. Can you talk about what this tournament means to you?
Yeah, I mean, in the context of that conversation, there was maybe 4 or 5 of us there, and I think it was me, Jamie Burland, Kevin Williams, and Owen, maybe 1 or 2 others. And yeah, Owen was the only one like championing the Irish Open. And at the time, the discussion was whether we would rather win, an EPT Villamura or something instead of the Irish Open. And I'd always thought like the EPT was like very prestigious, and I still do. I still want to win one day. But I think it really struck me this week running deep in it, just how much it meant to the Irish community and just how big an event it actually was. Like, I've never seen a rail like that, on most EPTs, maybe the odd one in London if you've got a big British rail, but I haven't seen that sort of buzz about the place. There were so many people that I'd never met coming up and congratulating me. So I know that, that's in terms of what Phil Baker said, there's like an element of folklore about it in Ireland now. Every time I go over to the Irish Open, people are going to want to talk to me. So yeah, it's just a very, very historical thing. And my dad sort of compared it, and when he was sort of hearing about that, my dad compared it to the WSOP main in a way where, you've got that, I hesitate strongly to use the word immortality, but you've got that, there's something in it where if you go to Vegas and you're a former world champion, there's sort of like something that goes along with you while you're over there. And I feel like I'll always have that in Ireland now. So, you don't get that sort of thing if you just win a random EPT, I guess. I'm very, very, very happy to have won it.
Well, beautifully put. And I think, just you chatting a bit more about it there, I think the Irish community are exactly how you describe them and would appreciate you saying that. Speaking of the Irish Poker Open, Dara, you penned an article this week entitled The Best and Worst of the Irish Open 2023. Right out of the gate, I want to say what a great job I think the organisers did to find a suitable venue after losing City West through no fault of their own. The RDS might be the only place that could house such a festival, and I must say the room looked amazing, and I heard plenty of positive reviews from the players too. The staff also put in one hell of a shift, it's fair to say. I imagine a lot of dealers are enjoying a well-earned week up with their feet after, I think, 8 consecutive days of long days as well. There were, however, a few issues that you highlighted, Darren. It's fair to say that there have been a couple of unsavory stories emerging since as well. Let's start with the 2 issues you had that pertain to the festival sponsor Poker Stars. Firstly, the way they made players have to bag for day 2 before selling their surplus tickets. And then secondly, maybe the live stream. Dara, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it sounds very self-serving, I think, when I complain about having, the rules around the satellites, because it's fairly well known that under the old rules, I used to do very, very well. And in fact, it was my favorite time of year, grinding Irish Open satellites. This year, I deliberately put a cap on how many I would win. And another effect of this rule is it forces me into the earlier day, which, I would rather play the last day, if I'm honest. And it also heavily incentivizes me to bag. I bagged up just over starting stack on my second bullet at the end of day 1A. And the main feeling I felt was not disappointment that I hadn't really got a run and run up a stack, but it was just kind of relief. Well, now I can have 2 days off and I can sell my 6 remaining tickets. I just don't see the point of this rule, if I'm honest. Like, I don't think they get anybody extra into the field. All that happened is, we all went on and sold our tickets to people who were going to play it anyway. I suspect they might even have lost a few. I know at least 2 guys who were intending to play the Irish Open, but they were under the misapprehension they'd be able to get a ticket for very cheap because they thought there'd be a surplus, and basically time ran out for them and they ended up not playing it at all. So I just don't understand the purpose of the rule. It just seems very pernickety and pointless, and creates this additional layer for us where we have to run off and find people. That's fine for people like us who know lots of people, but I had students who had multiple tickets, and they literally ended up going down the queue saying, "Oh, you're buying in? I'll give you 50 off or whatever if you buy it from me." So again, like what is the point of that exactly? The second point on the live stream, I have to qualify this by saying that I watched almost none of the live stream. I just watched a little bit at the end of day 3 when I got home because Kevin was on the feature table. But what I did watch kind of backed up all of the complaints I heard about it, that it just didn't feel like the Irish Open. There were no Irish voices in the box. They didn't know any of the Irish players clearly. And there was quite a disrespectful mocking tone towards the Irish recreationals as well, which came across. It just felt like, the regular Stars team taking the piss out of Irish poker rather than a celebration of Irish poker, which is really what the Irish Open should be about. That criticism was raised by a lot of the leading lights in Irish poker. People like Willow Connolly took to Facebook to complain about it as well. And Willow is not somebody who courts controversy or who would normally be critical. So that was something which I think left a bad taste in the mouth for a lot of Irish people. They just felt that the Irish Open, not only was it not Irish this year, but in terms of the commentary, but it actually sort of mocked the Irish rather than celebrated Irish poker.
Yeah, I got to agree. I did actually tune into more of it than you, Dara. I'm kind of somebody who will have it on while I'm sitting at the table. So I'm playing and watching what's going on at the same time. And I think Fergal Nealon put it best when he said that the lads were playing out of position. Clearly, Hartigan and Stapes, a veteran combo, they've a lot of experience. They can put on a slick show. There's an element of comedy, there's an element of calling the action, and some people love that shtick, maybe some people don't love it as much, but that's their performance and that has a big audience. But it just didn't seem to fit right. He used the phrase "played out of position," and it was kind of like that. It was kind of like, yes, okay, they had all the cameras, they had all the angles, the thing was sort of run pretty well, in and out with the pairs of commentary teams, but it just lacked that flavor of Irishness that, Fintan would bring, you would usually bring on a final day, particularly with the extra bit of analysis. I thought it was lacking in analysis actually throughout as well, which I think, there's a place for it. I think day 1 and 2 are probably supposed to be all about story finding and, particularly finding Irish stories. Of course, the traveling pros should get a bit of attention too, and it's great that they come, and that's a story in itself. But it's definitely a celebration of the pub player in Ireland who satellited in, and these kinds of stories didn't really get told this year. In fact, names were not even pronounced correctly on many occasions, which I was really surprised by. And then, of course, once you get down to the business end, you really do want that bit of extra good analysis, which, Dara, you've always brought when you've done it probably, 5 of the last 7 years or whatever it's been. And I just didn't feel like it was quite as sharp as it could have been. A bit disappointing, but look, Stars have got a 3-year deal on this one, so hopefully they'll listen to this feedback. I think everybody loves the Irish Open, just wants to see it do really well and be the best version of itself. So it's criticism for the sake of trying to make the thing better that we all care about. David, turning to you for a couple of other issues, as I think you were probably actually best placed to give your take on these ones. Dara also alluded to the extremely long days, day 3 in particular, and that got me thinking about possible solutions. One would be putting the buy-in up to 2K and maybe making it single re-entry. I think that would perhaps add to the prestige of the event, but also reduce the field so the structure could remain unaltered. The second idea I had was, that weird double no ante level at the beginning should just probably come out. I know it does offer a bit of extra play for people who are in there from the start, but repeating that level just seems a little bit pointless. I don't know, early on when you're then forced to play an extra hour or even 2 hours more than you would want on the third day. And then the third one is potentially reducing the clock to 50 minutes on day 1, which I'll be honest, I'm not crazy about that one. I don't like changing the structure in that way, but if they're a victim of their own success and it's going to be 300 or 3,000 people next year and they're still trying to do it in 4 days, I think that's maybe something that they have to consider. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you make a bunch of potentially good adjustments there, suggest some good adjustments. I don't think the reducing the blind levels on day 1 would necessarily move prestige or anything. the EPTs, as they are 60 minutes on day one and 90 minutes on day two, and there for the rest of the tournament. I know a few other like stops in Europe do that as well. So I don't think that would necessarily damage the prestige of the tournament or anything. I do agree about the no ante levels at the start. I don't know why organisers are still putting no ante levels in when we have big blind ante. It makes no sense to me. I had intended to play from the start if I wasn't too tired, since I'd just come back from Australia. But when I saw the 2 levels at the start, I was like, there's just no chance I'm popping in here.
Yeah.
It just doesn't. There's like, I know what the argument is for recreational players maybe feeling like they get a little bit more play. But when you start at 300 big steep or 200 or 150 big steep anyway, you still get a lot of play in an hour clock. Like, I don't think you need to have levels in there that almost prevent bad players from busting because they have too many chips, and when I say bad players, I mean people who are not recreational players. I mean people who are maybe there to gamble. Those sort of people are going to re-enter anyway. So like, I don't think you need to accommodate those people with earlier levels. Personally, I was at least a fan, if not the overall structure, I was a fan of the fact that they told us right at the start of day 3 that they intended to do a very long day, because that allowed me to sort of mentally prepare for it. I think one of the worst things is when they haven't thought this through and they have to extend it, maybe after the dinner break, and it feels like, a very draining experience. Not that it already wasn't, but I did at least appreciate that they were aware that they were going to have to do that. But as you say, it's over Easter weekend every year, so they have this very strict limit of 4 days that they have to get it finished in, I think. And if the field's going to increase again next year, they absolutely have to do something. You do not want 14-hour days if you can avoid them. I don't really think I would want to see the buy-in increased either, because I think it would lock some people out. It sort of goes back to what I was saying, comparing it a little bit to the WSOP main, where I actually like this direction that they've gone in with the Irish Open. The first year I ever played it was 2009, and I believe it was a 4K back then. And it was a much smaller field, but it also meant a lot of players who maybe otherwise would have got into it couldn't afford to satellite in. And I like the fact that it's open when it's the event that represents your country, and like people are going to be aspiring to it. That's the one event that everyone wants to play every year. I think it should be at a price point where people can afford to get into it. So I don't like the idea of raising the buy-in to lock people out in that way. But yeah, I don't think like blind adjustments on day 1 would be the worst thing if that's going to solve the issue.
Yeah,
before we move on, Dara, your thoughts?
Yeah, just on that, like, I don't think raising the buy-in would necessarily lock too many people out, because essentially what's happened is the Irish Open has turned into something where people are willing to fire a certain number of bullets, and very few people approach it as a pure freeze out, where they're only going to do one bullet. And in fact, one guy who I know quite well, who runs a club up in the north, Paul Rinty Monaghan, said that he has actually stopped running satellites for the Irish Open because he feels that it's pointless giving guys one bullet and sending them off down to play in an environment where everybody's firing 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9 bullets. And so I think actually maybe increasing it to 2K might actually would get some of those players back. I also think, I completely understand the reason why the buy-in came down. It was related to the economy. The year that David mentioned, which was also my first Irish Open, was peak Celtic Tiger, and there was just so much money in the country. I've often told the story that I ran into a golfer walking up the driveway to that Irish Open, and I had to explain to him what poker was. He thought it was like whist, and then he ended up entering the tournament. There was that kind of money around, so people just splashed around. Then obviously the economy crashed, and I think the low point was around 2015, which was the point at which JP came in. And I want to say as well, like, I obviously raised specific criticisms or things that could have been better this year in my piece, but JP has done an amazing job restoring the Irish Open. Everybody thought it was, it was a downward trend, and it seemed to be getting worse and worse every year. Whereas since JP has come in, it's gotten better and better every year until arguably this year. But again, that was due to circumstances beyond their control. They didn't have access to City West anymore, and they had some other issues with the venue in terms of capacity. But I would say that I think now there is a lot more money around Ireland. Ireland is a vibrant economy. I think maybe the best economy in Europe right now. So it's a completely different landscape. And I think, we are potentially going to start seeing some bigger buy-in tournaments. And I think the Irish Open should always be the biggest buy-in in Ireland. It would be weird if there's talk of a 3K in the Intercontinental in a few months. It'll be strange if the Irish Open isn't the biggest buy-in anymore. I think that might remove some of the prestige from it as well. So I think it might be the time to consider increasing the buy-in again. I think people will still try and run satellites. People will still try and satellite in. Other people will be able to buy in, et cetera, et cetera. So, but given that, the big issue we have is like, how do you run a tournament with 3,000 runners in 4 days and have a good structure and not have long days? That's just not possible. Some of those things have to give. So I think it's understandable they were chasing bigger and bigger numbers every year, but there's an upper limit. Like, we can't have a 10,000 runner field in a few years that still we're trying to run over 4 days. That just won't work.
Yeah, great points. I have to agree with you. While I do understand the points David made there, I do think that making it a 2K is actually another way to look at it, is that then the rake doesn't need to be quite as high because it's as a percentage, but could still be the same amount, which is obviously what they need to run the event as well. So I think a 2K single re-entry could be the sweet spot there, where people can fire again. You get a bad beat, day one, you can go again, but you don't feel like it's this like regional tour poker stars event where people are just firing bullet after bullet after bullet, and it kind of gets a bit silly sometimes. Anyway, moving on now to one of the negative stories I mentioned. This was the one I wrote about, actually, and it's the continuing presence of William Kassouf at live events. Leo Worthington-Lees went on Instagram on the night in question to call out Kassouf for having walked away from the table after losing a pot, allegedly bringing the chips that he lost with him before they were put into the pot. As soon as this story broke, it was corroborated by Keith Littlewood, who was one of the players in the pot. In a statement to me, Keith said that when the money was committed, quote, none of the stacks were counted or brought into the middle. Kassouf asked the dealer to leave it there and just sort it out after the river. I think that part is very crucial, by the way. He had top set aces with no redraws versus my straight with heart flush redraw. Seat 4 had straight with diamond flush redraw. The dealer counted out seat 4 stack and gave him the 725 quid from mine, a quarter of the pot. Then the dealer went to calculate the main pot as just the pre-flop chips were in the middle. Kassouf's stack had disappeared, and so had Kassouf. Everyone was saying, where is Will's stack? The dealer called the floor, who then got the security guards to go try and find him. He had disappeared without a trace. That's a direct quote from Keith Littlewood to me. Now, I immediately spoke to JP McCann, obviously organizer of the event, and obviously I felt like it was necessary to get his take, to ask him what had happened from his point of view. And he said the two players, Nikolai Ponomarev and Alex Seligman, had both said that they had spoken to William before he left. What I would say about that is it doesn't undermine Lisa's or Littlewood's version much, as it just means that he didn't leave the venue, which maybe he, didn't from their point of view. If asked for the pot not to be pulled in and he scarpers when it's his turn to pay up, then security couldn't find him. But that's certainly what it still looks like. Do you know, like if he disappears in that moment and they ask security and they can't find him anywhere, okay, maybe he hung out by one of his friends, or maybe he came back a bit later and hung out by one of his friends. If indeed he did do what he did, he would have chips that he would have to cash, and one would imagine that would have been difficult if the guys are right in saying that like he was trying to walk away with those chips. He'd presumably want to cash them in before he left the venue. Dara, what did you think when you heard about this? And maybe could you speak perhaps to the problem poker has right now, that of course any player in this situation should be innocent until proven guilty, but given Kassouf's very well publicized past thieving of money from his friend Ryan Mandara, he is viewed skeptically.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I wasn't there when this happened, and I can only go on what I've heard. And, as you said, innocent until proven guilty. The specific problem around Will is that the nature of the thing on which he was proven guilty of, palming chips, roulette chips, not poker chips, but if you have the ability to palm roulette chips, and that's not something you're born with either, that's something you have to cultivate, then you certainly have the same ability with poker chips. So I've always been a little bit on edge when I've been at a table with Will, and kept an eye on all the pots and make sure that there's no untoward sack. Now I have to say I've never seen any issues around that, but it does create this weird dynamic where you know that a player has in the past proven willing and able to do that, and that's particularly in a situation like an environment like the Irish Open, where lots of people are drunk and people not paying particularly attention. There's always the danger that somebody like that could take advantage of that. And I believe the camera situation was also quite lacking. I heard from one friend who said that a high stakes friend of his came, and when he saw the camera setup, he said there are going to be problems here for sure. This is not an acceptable camera situation for an environment where high stakes cash is being played. So there are all those issues around Will. I've never had any particular personal problems with Will, so I don't have really an axe to grind. But as I said, it does create that tension where you are worried that you have somebody at the table who might not be acting completely honestly.
Yeah, in my article, I also alluded to an angle that Will pulled on Barney Boatman's table, which Barney believed to be intentional, adding the caveat. Obviously, I'm not a mind reader, but I'm telling you what I saw and my very strong conviction that it was a deliberate stroke. He told a story of how Will told the cash table that he was playing 300 behind and then called the pre-flop action. Barney said that he waited intentionally until the turn to point it out to Will, who owed €30 to the pot, at which point Will claimed it was an honest mistake. Interestingly, since that article came out, another player, Carl Nolan, told an almost identical story of Will doing the exact same thing at his cash game table at the Irish Open, on this occasion playing 200 behind and not putting in the pre-flop €25, despite being told to 3 times by his tablemates. David, Leo, who obviously blew the whistle on this one, and you've also played with Will plenty, I'm sure, down the years. Yeah. What do you think needs to be done here?
It's an interesting question. I was in the bar when it happened. Leo had come into the bar and told a mutual friend of ours, and then he passed the information on to me. And my first sort of reaction was, all right, that's not surprising at all. And I think, well, you see again, innocent until proven guilty, therein lies the problem that Will has here, right? If it is somehow proven that he didn't do this, or it was, blown out of proportion or whatever, people still believe it because of his reputation, and he's done nothing to, improve that reputation in any way. He seems quite happy to live up to the bad boy image, to have everyone think he's a prick, to, just show up to these events and cause controversy. And he seems to enjoy the limelight. That's the problem. He's banned from a bunch of venues in the UK. He's now come over to Ireland, where he wasn't banned, and I think he probably will be after this. He's not going to have many places to play from here on if he keeps this up. And I honestly think, while I'm kind of a similar boat to Dara, I haven't had any personal beef with Will over the years. I find him infuriating to play with at times, but he'll pass me, at events and say hi, Dave, and I'll say hi, Will, and there's nothing really, beyond that said. But the real issue I think he has is something that I've heard one person talk about on Twitter that isn't really being brought up. I think people are assuming that if he stole €300, it's because he has a gambling addiction or something along those lines. I think it's more that he's a kleptomaniac and he just likes the attention. And you're getting towards the end of the trip. He's come over to Ireland. Nothing's really happened for him in the tournament series, and no one's going to be talking about him at the end of it if he doesn't do something. And I think that actually might just play into it. I think he just enjoys the attention so much that he might deliberately be doing things just to cause controversy. Because we're sitting here talking about him now. He didn't do anything in the Irish Open, and we're still talking about him. And I feel like he'll love that to a degree. So yeah, I really don't know what can be done about it. It's in Will's court. I get the feeling he doesn't really give a shit. And I think players should be more wary of him in future if that's the case. But to just quickly touch on something Dara said as well there, In regard to some of the criticisms of the tournament or how it was organized or whatever, I disagreed with some of what Dara said in his article, but one thing that he's just said that I really agreed with was a lack of cameras. And I noticed this on day 2 because I counted my stack down on day 2 during a break. I then went on break and came back and was absolutely certain that I was missing a 25k chip. And I said to my friends, I said to Jack and so on, look, I don't think I've miscounted this. I really don't think I've miscounted this, but I've got a 25k chip missing, I think. And I had a look up at the ceiling and I couldn't see a camera anywhere. And I was like, there's absolutely no way I can prove this. There's just no, fallback on it. Even if I say I'm certain I counted it, the dealer watched me count it, no one else knows what my stat was. So there's just no way of coming back from it. And I didn't highlight it at the time because I thought it might make it a more serious issue if other people realized there weren't any cameras. So I actually didn't highlight that at the time, but I think that was a big oversight, especially with the cash games running there. I think that was probably for me the biggest problem.
Yeah, great points, both of you. Sobering thoughts. They're actually very perceptive as well, Dave, from you. I appreciate you weighing in on this one. I know it's not easy to weigh in. You're brought in the show to celebrate your win. You're dragged into this kind of shite. But no, I do appreciate it. In a final point on this subject, I went on record myself this week about how I saw with my own eyes Will going south with tournament chips at last year's Irish Open. I was on his table. Dara, you and lots of our friends know this story because I immediately told you all the day it happened. Basically twice that I saw him remove his own chips from a stack. It made no sense to me. Like, why would someone do that? It made no sense to me that he would do such a thing until I later realized that he'd bagged up a day 1 starting stack from the previous day. And of course, in this format, it's best stacked forward. So therein lies where maybe the angle was. I did report it to TD Nick O'Hara, but nothing was done because obviously at that point it would have been my word against his. But nonetheless, I know what I saw with my eyes. Anyway, moving on. Louise Francoeur, this was another incident at a cash table over the weekend involving traveling Canadian player Louise and a local player. It is alleged that the local player slapped Louise and naturally enough, she called the floor. Now, it's a bit awkward to cover this one because Louise's statement was removed from Facebook. So we assume maybe it's better not to read from it because it's an ongoing investigation. We certainly don't want to do anything to corrupt the dignity of that investigation. But what she does still have up is a tweet where she says, pull camera footage. Oh, there is none. So again, we're harking back to the same issue. Speak to all involved. Oops, didn't talk to me. So she wasn't involved in the discussion about what should be done about the guy who allegedly slapped her. How strong was the slap? It doesn't matter. She's quite right about that. Would he have touched a man in that way? She asked that question. Ownership and promise to better handle next time would go a long way. Here, that was directly sort of saying that to JP, who had tweeted at her, the series of events described in your tweet is not fair nor an accurate account of the conversation we had. So again, that's why we don't really want to cover it in much more detail because perhaps they're sort of working out the facts of the situation and we don't want to prejudice it one way or the other. But Dara, maybe you could weigh in a general sense of like how awful this is, what a horrendous black mark this would be on the Irish Open to have someone, assaulted at the table, absolutely disgusting behavior being alleged here, and just sort of, I guess, like the safety of the players.
Yeah, obviously, in an environment where we're trying to get more women into poker, this is a pretty horrendous story. I've been quite surprised to see some people try to, in inverted commas, defend the action, saying that it was a tap rather than a slap on the leg, and that there's a huge difference. Like I really don't know. I mean, when did it become acceptable to touch women on the leg under the table, particularly women that you don't know? Again, harking back to the world that I came from, running world, like. I just couldn't imagine any male runner I know ever thinking it would be okay to tap a woman on the leg to bring her attention to something. You can use your voice, you can tap the table. If you really have to make contact, a gentle tap on the shoulder, it seems to be the better line than hitting somebody on the leg under the table. And I think men are often unaware of just how it's not really a matter of how hard the contact is. There's just certain types of contact that are not acceptable unless it's between friends. And one thing we're hoping to do on the chip racing, forthcoming episodes is to maybe have a lady on to talk about this and talk about like what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. I think a lot of men need to be educated on this stuff. You know, they often think they can do exactly the same thing to women as they do to men at the table, but that clearly is not the case. And there needs to be dialogue around this. And I believe Louise has said that that's her main purpose here. She wants to just spark some dialogue. I've also heard about another incident involving a woman from the Irish Open a few years ago, which I believe Lon McCarran also tweeted about. I think maybe there just needs to be some re-education of players, dealers, and the floor staff, and maybe even going all the way to the top. The tournament organizers need to kind of understand that certain things are just not acceptable. So I think that's something which has to be addressed, and hopefully, you know, something positive will come out of that in the long term. But yeah, you definitely don't want to create a situation where women are already a tiny minority. So, and if they're going to feel threatened at the table, I also think that there's an onus on the men at the table to sort of step in and intervene if they see something like that going on. It's not enough to say that, you know, well, it's every man for himself. Maybe it is every man for himself, but again, when you're dealing with a very small minority who feel vulnerable at the best of times in the poker world, you know, somebody should step in. I've over the course of my career on a few occasions, I have seen women mistreated at tables, and I've never stayed quiet about it. I think men do have a responsibility there as well.
No, you're absolutely right, Dara. David, I know you only heard about this story today, but your immediate thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I literally read the tweet, you know, not long before I came on, so I don't know the full background of it, but obviously, you know, you just take it at face value, and can analyze it that sort of way. I saw a not dissimilar incident when I was playing in Cannes a few years ago, where a French player, in my view, sexually assaulted the dealer as she was standing up, and I immediately called him out on it and called the TD over and asked what could be done. And the French players around the table, not that I'm targeting French poker in particular here, but all the players at the table happen to be French. I assume they're going to back their fellow player up, their, you know, the guy that probably plays in the same casino as them before, you know, some random Scottish kids coming up to their game. But they all sort of were surprised and were saying, oh, he didn't do anything that bad, you know, it's quite normal. But it speaks to what Dara's saying about education. I think that there are people out there who will just refuse to be educated. They feel like they have ownership over women in these situations. They're just not very good humans, and they won't be able to be educated. But I think, like, you know, in situations like this, it is good to have a bit of discourse. And you know, if something positive can come out of a very negative experience for I'm not sure what the lady's name was, but if something positive can come out of this situation, maybe it's a bit of discourse that will stop stuff like this from happening again.
Yeah, wise words again, Dave. Louise is the lady in question,
yeah,
is very much saying that that's what she wants out of it. She's almost already accepting that what happened. She's obviously disgusted by it, but what she really wants is something positive to come out of it, which would be exactly what you're saying there, a discourse, and maybe you know, maybe people just take the thing a bit more seriously, like they fucking should. But look, it has been a jam-packed episode focusing just on the Irish Open. I'm conscious we haven't, the world outside of the Irish Open doesn't exist this week. But I do realise that while obviously we are bringing up a lot of the criticism here, I want to reiterate what Dara said there. You know, there's plenty to admire about this event and its operation and execution, even this year, under, you know, more difficult circumstances. We love the Irish Open. It's an institution, and we only wanted to go from strength to strength. I know Stars penned that 3-year deal, so hopefully they can take some of these comments on board to improve aspects of it from their end. When Paddy Power pulled out of the Irish Open, I think it was 2015, it was in a really bad place, like Dara said, low turnout, a lot to criticize back then. JP and Paul O'Reilly have you know, revived the event as this big field 1K and restored so much of the excitement and pride in the event. So here's hoping they can rise to the challenge of making it better again next year and addressing some of these issues too. Finally, before we go, I have to, pay the bills here. The Chip Race Poker Series starts on Sunday on Unibet Poker. That's going to be 26 tournaments over 8 days, Sunday to Sunday. We're adding a 7K leaderboard and 3K winners free roll. That's coming straight out of Dara O'Kearney's pocket, right? That 10K is just from him. It's a gift. For everyone who plays the event and wins an event, you get put into that winners free roll to play against us at the end. Dara, 200K in guarantees in this one. I've threatened Bath picks. Are you looking forward to this?
I'm never looking forward to Bath picks, David. I'm sorry, that's never going to happen. Yeah, it's I'm very much looking forward to the series. Yeah, it's kind of nice to have another series to concentrate on just after the nonsense of the live poker. My wife usually spends about 48 hours after every festival explaining to me the many reasons why I should retire from live poker, some of which we've mentioned here. But yeah, I went back to strip playing online, and it's been going very well. So I hope I'll take a bit of online form at least into the Chip Race series.
Good stuff. Well, we are looking forward to playing that one next week. David, would you perhaps maybe like to join us for some of those events? You have to say yes now because you're our guest. Even if you're not going to, it's anonymous on Unibet, so you don't. No one can prove you wrong.
Absolutely, David. I'll be the person who wins it. Okay. I don't know what their username will be, but that'll be me.
Good stuff. Good stuff. On that note, I want to sincerely thank for all his fantastic opinions, and also congratulate once again the fantastic David Docherty.
Thank you.
Great to have you on, David, and thank you, Dara.
Thank you, David. I guess we're going to have to look out for DD now in the leaderboards on Unibet.
Indeed we are. Take care, guys.
Cheers, guys. See you.